Hey guys, welcome to Intellipaat. The web is one of the most important frontiers for any organization. In order to reach out to a large audience base, every organization has its own web application, which is why being a web developer is one of the most demanding career options. But how do you build a web application? Although there are many options out there, Django is one of the most easy to use and versatile web application development platform. As Django is written in Python, it is also quite easy to learn. Even though it's easy to learn, it is also quite powerful and powers some of the most popular websites like Instagram, Spotify, Bitbucket, amongst others. In today's session, we will learn how to use Django for web application development. Before you go ahead guys, do subscribe to Intellipaat's YouTube channel so you receive regular notifications on all our upcoming videos. Now let's go through the agenda. We will start the class by learning how to debug any Python application. Then we will learn how to use Python with MySQL database. Then we will learn how to deal with XML and JSON data in Python. Then we will have a quick introduction to Django framework. Then we will learn about Django templates and forms. After which we will learn about Django models. Then we will learn how to create RESTful web services using Django REST framework. After which we will learn about testing and security using Django. Then we will discuss some of the most important Django interview questions and their answers. These questions are aimed at helping you clear your next Django interview. After which we will have an end-to-end project. These projects will implement everything you have learned so far to give you some practical and real-world exposure. At the end of the class, we will also have a quiz so that you can recap everything you have learned so far. Don't forget to leave your answers in the comment section below. Also guys, if you're interested in end-to-end Django training, do check out Intellipaat's Django certification course. The link is in the description below. Now without any delays, let's start off with today's class.
Let's start off by understanding what exactly is a web application. So simply put, a web application is a software that can be accessed from a browser. Now what is a browser? Well, a browser is an application with which you can browse websites. So we've got different browsers such as Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome and Internet Explorer. And with the help of these browsers, we can access a web application. Now for communication to take place between any two entities, there has to be a proper set of rules between them for them to communicate. So let's say there are two people who want to communicate with each other. Now for them to understand each other, they'd have to speak or they'd have to know the same language and they'd have to speak the language with proper grammar, and only then they'd be able to understand each other. And same is the case when it comes to a web browser and web application. So both of them should know the same language and both of them should follow the same rules when speaking that language. So these rules between the browser and the web application are known as protocols. So there are different protocols such as HTTP protocol and the FTP protocol which help the web browser and the web application to communicate with each other. Now, a web application or a web server can host different web resources such as a PDF resource, a HTML resource and a JSON resource. Now, a browser, if it wants access to these web resources, then it would send a request to this web application. Then this web application would access that particular resource and in response would give that resource to this browser with the help of these protocols. So let me reiterate this. This browser, by following those protocols, so it could either be HTTP protocol or the FTP protocol, it sends a request to this web application and it basically tells the web application that, so I'd want this PDF resource. So in response, the web application accesses this PDF resource and it gives to the web browser. So this is how a web browser is able to communicate with the web application. So now that we've understood what exactly is a web application, let's understand what is a web framework. Now when it comes to most of the web applications, most of their core features remain the same. That is, most of these web applications require some sort of authentication. So they need some sort of security and most of them require database connectivity and so on. So there are some core features which are common to all of these websites. Now let's say you are building a website from scratch and you would have to build everything from start. So that would be a very tiresome and a very cumbersome task. You'd have to start off by giving in all of the security features by yourself, all of the database connectivity features by yourself. And that is a Herculean task. So this is where a web framework comes in. So you can consider a web framework to be a collection of different APIs and classes which would help you to build a website very easily.
Quick info guys, if you're looking for end-to-end training in Django, do check out Intellipaat's Django certification training course. The link is in the description box below. Now let's continue with the class.
So a web framework consists of different features, such as it'll make your life very easier. So it provides you automatic features for working with the database, it'll provide you templates, and it'll also provide you security features. So let's talk about the first one, which is database. So with the help of a web framework, you don't have to establish the connection with the database all by yourself. So the web framework takes care of the database connectivity by itself, and it's a very easy task. Now the web framework also gives you a lot of templates. So what exactly is a template? Well, when a web browser sends a request to the web application has to return something. Now, when it returns, it has to have a proper template. So this is where different templates come in. So this is where you can actually choose how your response looks like, how your result looks like. And then obviously your web framework would provide proper security features.
Hey guys, just a quick info. So if you are interested in doing an end-to-end certification course in Django, then Intellipaat provides the Python Django certification course. So you can check out the course details in the link mentioned below. So let's continue with the class.
So when you're building a website, there is a very good chance that hackers out there might add in malicious links into your website. So this is where a web framework provides you proper security features so that it is not breached by any unwanted malwares or any unwanted attacks. Right. So there are a lot of web frameworks out there, such as you've got Django, you've got Flask, you've got Pyramid, and you've got Web2Py. And in this course, we're going to learn comprehensively about the Django framework. Right. So let's understand some of the features of the Django framework. So Django is one of the most popular open source web frameworks built for Python. So with the help of Django, you can build web applications in a fast and simple way. So it wouldn't really take you much time to get started with Django, right? So let's say if you're building a website from scratch, and if it takes you around 10 days to build a website, on the other hand, if you choose Django and you try to build your website, then it would take maybe 1 or 2 days to complete building your website. So Django is extremely fast to build your web applications. And the next feature of Django is it is secure of clickjacking and SQL injection. So what exactly is clickjacking? Well, as I've already told you, when you're building a website, there are a lot of cases where hackers might try to add some sort of malicious links in your website. So this is where Django provides foolproof methods to secure for clickjacking, right? So there would be absolutely no chance for a hacker to add malicious links into your web application. And also Django provides security for SQL injection. So what is SQL injection? Now you guys also know that database is the most important feature when it comes to backend websites. So there might be cases where a hacker might want to get into the database which is connected with the website. So if he gets into the database, then he'd have the entire access of all of the users and their entire information. So this is where Django provides security so that no hacker is able to penetrate your database. Now Django also provides scalability. So what do I mean by this? So let's say if you start off by 10 users when you're building the website, but then again your web application becomes a hit and your number of users keep on growing. So from 10 users, let's say your number of users go on to around 1000 users. Now to have this capacity of 1000 users, your website or web application has to scale up, and Django helps you with that. And finally, obviously Django helps in database integration. So with the help of Django, you can connect with either MySQL or SQL Server. So it becomes extremely easy for your web application to be connected with the database. Right. Now let's look some of the famous companies which use Django framework. So we've got Instagram, Dropbox, Pinterest, and Spotify. So all of these major companies out there are using Django to maintain their websites. Right. Now let's go ahead and actually install Django into our system. So the prerequisite while installing Django needs to be that we actually have Python installed in our system. So to see if Python is installed in our system, we need to go to command prompt and we need to type in this command. So Python space ---- version. So we'll go ahead and we have to type in this command, and if this gives in a Python version, then it would mean that Python is installed in our system, else it is not. Now after that, we'd have to go ahead and install Django into our systems with this command, which is pip install Django. Right. Now let me actually go to command prompt. So I'll just type in cmd over here, And let me check my Python version. So I'll type in Python space hyphen version. Right, so I see that Python is installed and the Python version is Python 3.7.4. Now to install Django into my system, all I have to do is type in pip install Django. Now since I already have Django installed in my system, I'll not go ahead and click on enter. Right, now that we have installed Django into our systems, let's go ahead and create our first Django project. So to create a new Django project, we'd have to use this command over here, Django admin start project, and then we'd have to give in the name of the project. So over here, the name of the project is website. So when we go ahead and run this command, this will create a new folder from where we started the command prompt. Now, if we go into this folder website, this would comprise of another folder with the same name as the root directory. So the name of the root directory was website, and inside this there'll be another folder with the name website, and this folder comprises of all of these files. So it'll have an init file, a settings.py file, a urls.py file, and wsgi file. Right, now let's actually go ahead and create a Django project. So let me type in the command. So the command was Django-admin. After this, I'd have to type in start project, and then I'd have to give in the name of the project. So the name of the project is website. So I'll click on enter. Now let me go to desktop and see if this has been created. Right. So over here we see that there is this new folder with the name website. I'll go inside this, and as we saw in the PPT over here, we have this folder website, and the name of this folder is the same as the root folder, and there is another .py file with the name manage. And I'll go inside this. Now this has all of these files over here. So there is init.py, settings.py, urls.py, and wsgi.py. Now let's actually understand all of these files in PyCharm over here. So starting with init.py. So this file basically makes sure that our folder is treated as a package, right? So this init.py, this over here makes sure that this website folder is actually treated as a package and not just as any other folder. Then we've got the settings.py file. So the settings.py file comprises of different settings. So we've got the security. So we've got the secret key over here to launch our app. And then we've got different settings. So these are the settings for the installed apps over here. So these are the different installed apps. And then we've got the middleware for the security purpose. After that, we've got the list of templates over here. So these are the different settings in the settings.py file. And then we have this urls.py file. Now, every website or every web application has different URLs. So when you open a website and you scroll through different tabs of it, what you're basically doing is you're scrolling through different web apps, or you're scrolling through different URLs over here. And this, what you see are the list of the URLs which are present in that website. So let me actually give an example of this. So over here, I am at this site intellipaat.com blog, and this is the URL. Now what I'll do is I'll open this first link. Right, so over here, this is the next URL over here. What is natural language processing? Now similarly, let me open this tab over here. So over here, the URL which you see is ETL tutorial for beginners. Now these are just URLs which are given inside this list over here, right? So this is why the urls.py file is used to give in the list of all of the URLs of your resources. And then we have the wsgi.py file. So this basically stands for Web Server Gateway Interface, and it is used to establish a connection between the web application and the web server. So for that communication to take place properly, wsgi.py file is used. And then we finally have the manage.py file. So this is actually used to run the server and add different users to the web application. So now that we've looked at the core files of our project, let's understand about URL mapping and views. So let's say if there is a match of that resource in the urls.py file, then the urls.py file would call a view. Now this view is nothing but functions or classes which take a web request and return a web response. Now let's again understand URL map. So we've got a user who requests for a resource from this browser over here. Now that resource could be anything. So it could be a tutorials page, it could be a blog page, or it could be any other page. So this request is sent to this urls.py file. So the URL over here is tutorials.urls. So if it is found in this urls.py file, then it will invoke a function from this view. And this view would respond with that particular resource to this browser. So this is what basically happens when a browser sends a request to the web application.
Quick info guys, if you're looking for end-to-end training in Django, do check out Intellipaat's Django certification training course. The link is in the description box below. Now let's continue with the class.
Right, so now we'll go ahead and create our first Django app. Right, so we'd have to open our command prompt and go to the same directory where we created the project, and we'd have to enter that directory. And now after that, we'll type in dir just to make sure that we have the project name in the manage.py file. And then we'll use this command over here. So the command is python manage.py run server, and this will boot up our web server. Right, and this is what we get. So we'd have to use this link over here, go to this link, paste it in our browser location, and we'd have successfully launched our project. Alright, so let me actually do this. So let me go inside the project. So I'll type in cd website. Now let me type in dir over here. So I see the name of the directory, which is website, and I also have the manage.py file. Now I'd have to launch the server. So to launch the server, I'd have to type in Python, and then I'd have to give in manage.py. After that, I just have to type in run server.
Hey guys, just a quick info. So if you are interested in doing an end-to-end certification course in Django, then Intellipaat provides the Python Django certification course. So you can check out the course details in the link mentioned below. So let's continue with the class.
So this is where the project would be open. I'll copy this over here and I'll paste this. I'll click enter. Right, so we have successfully launched our project. So we see that the install worked successfully. Congratulations. Now let's say I want to add a new web application to my website over here. So what I'll do is I will go inside this project over here. So I'll just open command prompt and I'll exit this. So to exit, I'd have to press Ctrl C. Now I'll open another command prompt. So from over here inside this project, I will type in cmd and I'd have to create a new web application. So to create a new web app, this would be the syntax. So I'll type in python manage.py. After that, I'll type start app and given the name of the app. So let's say the name of the app is tutorial. Right, so I've successfully created this new folder inside my parent directory. Right, so initially we did not have this tutorial folder over here. After running this command python manage.py start app tutorial, we have created a new folder with the name tutorial. Now let me also open PyCharm. So you see that we have this new folder over here which comprises of all of these files. Now if you look closely, one file is missing from this tutorials folder, which is the URLs folder. So I'll go ahead and have a copy of this. So let me go to the parent folder over here. Right, so let me open website. I'll copy this URLs folder and go inside the tutorial folder and paste it over here. Now I have the urls.py file inside my tutorial folder as well. Right, so now I'd have to create a new web application where I actually want the web page to just show this text. This is Sparta. So let me see how that can happen. So let me start off by going into this urls.py file. So this is what we have over here. Now this is the initial URL. Now instead of this, what I want is I want this to print something. So I'll type in path over here, and since this would be returning from the home page, I'll just put in single quotes over here. So if I put in single quotes as the first argument, this means that I'm returning something from the home page. And then I'd have to add a view. As we saw in the previous slides, for the web application to return something, it needs a view. So I'll type in views dot, and then I'll give in the name of the function, which would be home. So I'll type in name equals home. Now after this, we also have to import views. So I'll type in from all import views. Right, so all of the errors have been removed over here. Now I'll remove this one over here. So this, what you see, is just a list of all of the URLs which are present in this web application. Right, now after this, we have added this view over here, but we don't actually have this view inside this view.py file. So let me go ahead and add the function. So I'll type in def and then I will name the function as home. Because in this urls.py file, I have given the name of this view as home. Alright, so let me go to this view. Now since we know that a view actually takes a request from a web browser, right? So web browser sends a request to this view and this view in response returns something. So I'll just type in request over here and inside this I'll give in the body. So this has to return something, but since the request is in the form of HTTP, the return or the response also needs to be in the form of a HTTP protocol. So I'll use the function HTTP response over here, and inside this what I want the home page to return is this text. So this is Sparta and this is what the home page will show when I open it. Right, now again we have this error over here because we actually have to import this. So I'll type in from django.http import HTTP response. Right, so this is also done. Now the last thing which we have to do is we have made the changes in the urls.py file of our web application, but we also have to add this link in our main project over here. Right, so I'll go into the urls.py file of my main project and inside this I'll again add a path and over here I'll put in single quotes over here. So this would mean that this is the main page, and to this main page I have to include the tutorials page. So include tutorial.urls. So I'll put in a comma over here and I'd also have to import the include method. So I'll include this. Right, so we have everything set up. Now what I'll do is I'll open command prompt again, run the project and see what happens. So I am inside my project over here. So I'll type in Python manage.py run server. Alright, now let me copy this over here and let me paste it again. So we have successfully created this web application where our home page shows this text. This is Sparta. Now just for practice, let me actually create another project and another app over here. So this time I'll name this project as Sparta. So we all know the command. So that would be Django-admin start project. After this I'd have to give in the name of the project, which would be Sparta. So let me go to desktop. Right, so we have successfully created this new folder with the name Sparta. I'll go inside this and this is what we have over here. So we have this manage.py file and we also have this Sparta folder, and it comprises of these 4 files which we know what exactly are. Alright, now I'd have to go ahead and create a new web app inside this. So I am over here. Now let me go ahead and type in cd Sparta. Now let me type in dir. So we see that we have this manage.py file and we also have this Sparta folder. Now inside this I'd have to create a new web app. So I'll type in Python and then I'd have to give in the manage.py file. After this I'll type start app and give in the name of the app. So the name of the app is, let's say 30. So I'll just hit enter. Now I've created this new folder 30 which comprises of all of these files. Now again, this does not have the urls.py file, so I'll open the Sparta folder. I'll copy this and I will paste it inside this 30 folder over here. Now let me go ahead and open this with PyCharm. So we have this folder over here. So this is our main folder and this is the web app over here. And this is the urls.py file of the main project, and this is the urls.py file of our web application. Now I'd have to add a URL over here. So I'll type in path, and since this is being redirected from the home page, I'll just put in single quotes over here, and then I'll have to type in the view which would return something. So view dot, and this time I'll just name it to be Sparta again. And after this, so this actually has to be views and not view, and then the name as well, I'll give this as Sparta. Right, so over here I'd have to import the views method. So from install, import, I'd have to type in views.
Quick info guys, if you're looking for end-to-end training in Django, do check out Intellipaat's Django certification training course. The link is in the description box below. Now let's continue with the class.
Right, so we have made the changes to the urls.py file of this web app. Now I'll go to the views.py file and let me create the method over here. So def, and then I'd have to give in the name of the view, which would be, let me just confirm over here. So the name of the view is Sparta. So def of Sparta, and this takes in a request over here. So I'll type in request, and this would return something, and the return would be in the form of HTTP response. So I'll type in HTTP response, and the response would be we are 300. Now let me go ahead and import this from Django.http import HTTP response, right? So we have also made the changes in the views.py file, and we'd have to make the final change, which is in the urls.py file. So over here I'd have to import the include method and also add in a new path over here, right? So now I'd have to include the final path over here. So let me put in tab over here, lb path, I'll put in single quotes over here, and after this I'd have to use the include method, and I'd have to include 30.urls. I'll just put in a comma over here, right? So we have successfully created this web app. Now let me go ahead and run the manage.py file. So lb python manage.py, and I'll type in run server. Let me copy this link again and paste it over here, right? So we have successfully created this web app where it states we are 300.
Here we will discuss the Capstone project for Django self-paced course. This project encapsulates all the concepts of Django that we have already discussed. So without any delay, let's take a look at the agenda. First of all, we will build a web application using Django Web Framework. Then we will extend a web application with REST API capabilities using Django REST Framework. Alright, now let's see what are the softwares that need to be installed in our systems. First of all, Python should be there, Django should be installed, and then Django REST Framework should be installed as well. For managing the database, we will be using MySQL. And last but not the least, you should have Postman or Insomnia to handle the HTTP requests. So let's start with the first part of our Capstone project. Here we are supposed to build a web application using Django Web Framework where users can see and post their thoughts. The first requirement is the web application will have a dashboard or home where latest posts will appear. Second requirement is in order to post thoughts, one has to be a registered user. So that means we need to create a registration form. Third requirement is user needs to be logged in order to see their profile in the navigation bar. So that means we need to create a login logout system as well. Fourth requirement is user can post new thoughts from their profile only. So that means we are supposed to create a profile for users. Fifth requirement is from database latest post will appear in the dashboard. And the sixth requirement is users should be able to log out once they are done. And that is part of login logout system itself. So yeah, let's get our hands dirty and let's start with the project. Alright, let's go ahead and create a new project. We'll head on to command prompt. We'll run this command Django admin start project, and we'll name this project as project. Hit enter. So this command will create a project directory inside the directory that we are running the command prompt from. So yes, this project directory has been created. Let's go back to our command prompt and let's go inside this project directory. Project. Yes, we are inside project directory, and now we are gonna start an application. And let's say the application is called home, which will be our main application. And we'll run this command Python manage.py start app and hit enter. Alright, so let's go back to the directory. Yes, home application has been created for us, but before moving ahead, let's go inside this directory And as you can see, one file has been missing here, which is urls.py. And let's go inside project directory and copy and paste this file over there. Now, in order to perform further operations, I will open Python. Alright, before moving ahead, I have to perform some changes inside this settings.py file. So I will be changing the database from the default one, which is our SQLite tree, to MySQL. And then I have to add the database name here in place of the default one. Let's keep it project. And then I have to add the user, which is my root. And then I have to add the password here as well. Here password is empty, so I'll leave it blank. And then I'll add the host, which is my local host. And then I have to add the port number as well, which is gonna be 3306. And last but not the least, I have to add one option here so that I can prevent data loss from my database. And it goes like this: option, and inside the dictionary we have to add command set SQL mode to strict transtable. Okay, and yes, so this is our configuration for MySQL database. We have to perform one more configuration here. Since we have created a new application called home, we have to let Django know that we have a newly created application in our project, and in order to do that we have to add it inside the installed apps list. And let's add it here. Yeah, and we are good to go. And before we run our server, let's go ahead and create the database that we just added here. And let's open XAMPP and run Apache server and MySQL. Let's click on admin. It will lead you to localhost PHP myadmin page where you can create a new database, and let's name it as project, and let's create it. Alright, so we have a database here called project, and now let's go ahead and open command prompt and let's run our server. Run server, hit enter, and yes, our server is running in this address. And let's go ahead and see how does it look. We will be building our web application in this web server. So let's go ahead and start our development process. First of all, we'll be setting the URLs path so that we get to see the home page of our web application when we land on our Django's development page. Alright, let's go back to our project and let's go inside projects, urls.py. First we'll include here, and then we'll set the URLs path for our development page, and we have to keep it blank. We'll include, so here we'll be including home applications URL. So basically this command will point to the home applications urls.py file, and there we have to add another URL path so that we get to see a view when we land on the home page. But before we add a view here, we have to import the views inside the views.py file. So let's go ahead and import from .import views. Alright, now we will add one view. Let's say we call it home. We have not created any views yet. We have to create it afterwards, and let's name it home. Alright, now let's go to our views.py file, and we don't have any views here, so we have to create a view called home. Alright, and it will take a request obviously, and we will be rendering template or a view that will show up in the development page. So we will render the request and it will return, let's say, a template called homepage.html, and then we don't have any context here. Let's keep it blank. Alright, so this is our view, but since we might have noticed here that we don't have any HTML files or any template files created yet, so let's go to our project and create a directory here for our templates. We'll store all of our templates here. Let's go inside the template and create a HTML file. Let's create the base file here, and from that base file we will be inheriting all the templates inside our template folder. So let's create another HTML file. Let's say homepage. Yes. Alright, now let's go inside base.html directory and we will add the tags here. Let's say a block called title, and we will end the block here. End block title, sorry, end block title, and similarly we'll be adding another block here for our content. So block content, let's keep it blank as of now, and let's end our block here. Alright, now let's go to our homepage.html. Let's remove this and let's extend the base file. Extends, and here base.html. Alright, now inside the title block, block title, we want to add a title here. Let's end it. Let's say post your thoughts. And then we will be having some content obviously, and as of now let's try a simple one. Block content. Let's end the block content here, and let's add something. Let's say inside a paragraph we will add hello everybody. Alright, so we have created our templates inside the folder called template, but Django doesn't know it yet. So in order to tell Django that we have created another folder called template inside our project, and when you are looking for templates you need to go and open this folder called template. In order to do that we have to go inside this project's settings.py folder and make some configurations inside this templates. We have to follow this format. Let's copy this and paste it inside, and we will just name our folder, which is template. Alright, so Django can tell that it'll look for templates inside this template folder. Now let's go back to our command prompt. Let's run this server again. Yes, this server is working. Let's go back to our command prompt and run our server again. And it's working, it seems. And let's refresh it, and there seems to be a problem here. Alright, so in this file we have a syntax error. Let's go back to our project inside. So let's remove this space here. Yes. Alright, let's run our server again. Let's go back to browser and refresh it. Yes, it's working fine. As you can see, our title has been displayed here and our content is being displayed here. So let's go back to our project and start developing the web application that we are supposed to build. Alright, now let's go ahead and create a navigation bar option inside our web application. And in order to do that, we'll go inside template folder and create another HTML file. Let's call it navbar. Hit enter. Let's remove this and extend our base file here. Base.html file extends base.html. Alright, that's inside the block content. We will add our navigation bar. So let's just end the block here and no space and block content. And then inside this we will create our navigation bar. Let's keep it unordered list, and inside this we will have a list of options that we want in our navigation bar. For example, home, user profile, about, login, registration, things like that. As of now, let's create list, and inside that we want our home option. As of now, let's keep the href to blank, and let's say we want to display the about option as well. And in order to do that, we have to create this another list called about, and yeah, and then we want user registration form option here as well. And so in order to add it, we will add the registration form option here. Let's keep it blank. Let's call it sign up. Alright, as of now, let's see if it is working or not. And let's go back to our home page. Let's include the navigation bar HTML file here. So we will include the navbar.html inside the block content, remember. So we would include our navigation bar option inside the home.html page. So let's go back to our server and refresh it. Yes, you can see our navigation list has been displayed over here, and we will customize it, but we got to know that this is working. But in order to customize it, we have to create a CSS file. So but we will make this project structured, and in order to keep it clean, we will create another directory. Let's call it static. Alright, let's go ahead and create this static file, and here we will be storing all of our CSS, images or JavaScript files. So let's go inside this and create a file. In fact, let's create a folder called CSS so that we can keep it clean. And alright, now inside this I will create one file called bootstrap.css. Hit enter. And since we are not focusing much on the front end part, so I'll just add one simple CSS file over here, and you can pause the video and watch the configurations here. Alright, so I will paste it over here and save it. Alright, Now we have a folder called static, and inside this we have a CSS directory where we are storing one simple bootstrap CSS. And in order to tell Django that we have this static file inside our project, what we are going to do is we have to configure it. And in order to do that, we have to go inside settings.py and perform one simple configuration. I'll just copy the configurations here and I'll explain it what's going on. So this configuration is for Django to create one folder called assets, which will be the static root, and this assets folder will be basically the replica of the folder that we have stored our static files in, which is static. So and every time we modify the static folder, we have to perform one command in command prompt to update the assets folder as well. Now let's go ahead and save this, and let's go back to our command prompt and let's clear the screen. And now let's perform the command that I was talking about. Python manage.py collect static, hit enter. As you can see, 20 static files copied to assets. Alright, now if you go back to the project, you can see one folder called assets has been created for us. So inside this we have the CSS file, and if you click here you can see the CSS file here. Now let's go back to our command prompt and let's run our server. Python manage.py server, hit enter. Yes, it's working fine. Now let's go back to the browser and see if the changes are reflecting. Okay, I think we have made some mistake here. Alright, let's check here. Okay, the link has to be added inside the blog content. Yeah, let's save it. Let's refresh it. As you can see, we have the navigation bar over here, and let's go ahead and create a registration form, user registration form. So I'll head back to my project. Now let's go ahead and create a new application called users, where we will be creating our user registration forms, login logout systems, things like that. So let's go ahead and head on to our command prompt. Let's stop this server for a while and let's create one application. Python manage.py start app. Let's name it users, hit enter. Alright, let's go back to our project. Yes, users has been created for us. Now let's copy and paste our urls.py from project. Let's head on to our project and let's open projects, copy and then paste it over here. Alright, let's refresh it. Let's go back to our project. Users.py has been added in the users application as well. So before moving ahead, we have to add this newly created application inside the installed apps list. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's hit enter and add our newly created application over here. Alright, let's save it, and now we will go inside users views and we will create one view that will show the user registration form. So in order to do that, I will import the user creation form from Django.contrib. Oh my bad. contrib.auth.forms, and we will import the user creation form. Let's create our view now. Let's call it register, and it will take the request. And alright, so we want this view to render one form context. So in order to do that, I will store my user creation form inside this instance. Let's call it form, and let's Yeah, let's do that and let's return request. Well, we are gonna render one template here as well, so let's name it register .html. Now we are going to render the context that I was talking about, the form context. So in order to do that, I will have to add it inside a dictionary. And alright, I have to add a render here. So let's go ahead and create this template so that we can render this inside our view, and we will add it inside the template directory. HTML file, register, the same name that you've given over there. So enter, delete all this, and now we are going to extend the base file over here. Extends base.html, enter. Now let's load the static folder as well, and load static. Now we will add the navigation bar over here. Now let's start our block content. Let's start block content, and then we will add the navigation bar over here. Nav bar.html. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start a div so that I can separate my form from the navigation bar. Div. So now I'm gonna add my form inside this directory. Let's go ahead and create the form. I will start the form tag here. Now this form will be taking post method. Since we are using post method here, so we have to add the CSRF token over here in order to avoid the cross-site request forgery, and this token looks like this, CSRF token. Now I'm gonna add the field set over here where I will be rendering my form context inside this field set. Let's go ahead and render our form, and I will be rendering it as paragraph. So before this form context, I want to display one simple text. Let's say I'm going to add one legend over here, and I want it to display join now, and let's go ahead and save this. But we have only created the form over here, but we have not added any button for users to submit the form. So let's go ahead and create a button, and let's add the button tag over here. So I want this button to have button class, and also I want it to be of type submit. Let's go ahead and write the text I want inside the button. Let's say sign up, and yes, let's save this, and let's go back to our URL. So we have to add one URL for this view that we have just created for user registration form. Now let's go ahead and add one URL path for the user registration form that we have just created. And let's head on to users, and let's remove this, and in place of home.urls I will just add the view that I want to be rendered over here. The view. Alright, let's import the view first from .import. So I want the register view to be rendered over here. Let's name it register. Alright, now let's go ahead and add the URL path that will be pointing to our users urls.py. So we have to go inside projects folder, and we will be adding another URL path over here for our register form. So we will add register, and we will include the users.urls folder, and let's save it. Alright, and now let's go ahead and create the user registration form and the login logout system. And for that I will head on to users views.py and I will import. Let's go ahead and create user registration form, and first of all I will create one new Python file over here. Let's say forms, and inside this I will add my registration form. First of all, let's go ahead and import forms from Django. Let's import forms. Now I will be importing user creation form, and basically Django contrib.auth.forms import user creation form. So basically this user creation form will have three fields: username and password 1 and password 2, but it does not have the emails field. So in order to do that, we will create one class over here. Let's name this new class as user register form, and we will be inheriting it from user creation form. Now we want the email field over here. So in order to do that, I will add this new instance called email, and I want my forms to have email field. Alright, now I'm gonna create one meta class over here, meta. So it's gonna have the model, which is built-in user model. So I have to import this user model before I can add it over there, and in order to do that I will import from Django contrib auth models import user. So let's import it, and we want the fields such as username, email, password 1 and password 2 to be displayed over there. So I'll mention it over here. Fields equal to, I'll add it inside a list. So username and your email, then password 1 and password 2. Alright, let's go ahead and save it. Let's go to our views where I will be creating the view for user registration form. Let's go ahead and import the form that we have just created. .forms import user register form. Alright, now let's go ahead and create our view. Let's name it a register. It will take a request, and yes, if the form request is post, then we will perform some operations such as checking if the form is valid or not, and if it is, then we are going to save it, and we want Django to redirect us to the login page once we submit the form. So if the request method is post, then I'm gonna check the validation of the form. So in order to do that, let's create one instance, form instance, using the user register form, and now I am ready to check if the form is valid or not. Form dot is valid, then I am gonna save if the form is valid. Alright, now I want Django to redirect us into the login page once I submit the form. So in order to do that, I will just enter return redirect, but before I redirect it, I have to import the redirect function here. So let's, yes, alright, now it's working. Now let's go ahead with the condition else. If the request method is not post, we want the Django to display us the same form. So let's say form instance, and I want the user register form, and I want to return the same template. And let's go ahead and register.html, and I want to render the form instance over here. Alright, I have to remove one M from here. Alright, now I have my view for my registration form. Now let's go ahead and create this register.html template, and I also don't have a login page. I will also have to create it before I run my server. Let's go ahead and create a template now. Create a new HTML file. Let's name it register. Hit enter. Let's remove all of this and extend our base file over here. Things base.html. Hit enter, and then I will be importing the static file. I will be loading it. Load static, and then I will start my block content. All right, and my block and block content. All right, now inside this I will add my registration form, but before that I want the page to display the navigation bar as well. So let's go ahead and add the navigation bar. Include navbar.html. Alright, now let's go ahead and create the form. I want the form and the navigation bar to be separate. I don't want it to overlap, so I want to create a new div for my form. So I just started. Alright, let's go ahead and create a form here. So my form is going to take the method post method, and since we are using a post method over here, we have to add the token CSRF token in order to avoid the cross-site request forgery. So we will add the token over here, CSRF underscore token, and yeah, let's go ahead and start a field set, and this will contain my form. So I want my form to be displayed over here. Let's display it as paragraph, and also I want to display one text inside this field set. Let's add a legend over here. Let's say join. Alright, now let's save it. But before we move ahead, we will add one style here so that the navigation bar and the registration form don't get overlap. So I will just add the styles, and let's say I will add one margin top, let's say 80 pixels, and I want the width of the form to be around 900 pixels, and let's say I want the margin to be set at 80 pixels and outer. Alright, now let's go ahead and save it. Now that we have the template as well as the view for our registration form, let's go ahead and create the URL. We will go to users.urls.py, and I will just remove it. So I want to render one view over here. My views. Alright, I have to import my view before I do that. From dot import views. Now I can import my register view, and I will just name it register. Alright, let's save it. and I will go ahead and add one URL path in my main application, which is my project, and I will go to URLs so that this URL will lead or map to the users url.py folder. So let's go ahead and do that. Register, and I will include the user URLs folder. Alright, let's save it. Alright, I have to add one comma over here, and now I can go ahead and save it. Alright, then let's go ahead and run our server, and I will restart it. It's working fine. Let's go to browser, let's refresh it, and now let's head to register. Okay, it's throwing an error here. Let's check what the error is. Alright, let's fix it in a second. Alright, let's check our forms. Yes, we have made a mistake here. Let's fix it. Then let's check our view. We need to add one request method here. Let's add the request post here, and I have to add parentheses here. So let's save it, and let's go back to our command prompt. Let's restart it. Okay, and let's refresh it. Yes, our registration form has been displayed over here, and but have you noticed one thing? We don't have a submit button here, and our registration form does not look pretty. But in order to do these things, let's go back to our project. First of all, I will import one package called crispy forms, which will enhance the user interface of the form. So let's go ahead and install it. In order to do that, I will run this command: pip install Django crispy forms. Hit enter. It's gonna take a few seconds to install, and yep, we have already installed it. So let's clear the screen. Let's go back to our project, and I will import the crispy forms inside my register template. Let's go ahead and import it. Load crispy forms tags, and I'll remove this and add the filter over here as crispy. Alright, I have added the crispy tags filter here, but I need one more thing in my form. I need the submit button. So in order to do that, let's add button here. Let's start one div, and I will start my button tag here, and I want this class to be button, and I want it to be of type submit. So I want the sign up text over there to be displayed. Let's add it, let's save it, and then let's restart our server. Python manage.py run server. Alright, it's working fine. Let's go back to our browser. Let's refresh it. Oh, it's throwing one error. Let's see. Load crispy forms tag. Alright, so load crispy forms tags. Okay, we are using hyphen, not underscore, so that's why it's showing an error. Let's fix it and then restart the server. Let's refresh it. another error. Alright, so load crispy forms tags. So this is throwing one syntax error. Alright, the problem is we have not registered the crispy forms tags in our installed apps. So let's go back to our project and open settings. Inside this list we will add crispy forms, crispy forms, and I'm gonna save it. Let's go back and restart our server. It's again throwing one error. Alright, let's go back and again underscore here. Let's save it and let's restart our server. It's working fine. Now let's go back and refresh it. Yes, our sign up button is being displayed over here, and you must have noticed the form looks better now. So alright, we have the registration form. Let's try and giving an input over here. Let's say Intellipaat in Intel @example.com. Alright, once we submit it, it's throwing one error because we have not created a login page yet, and we have mentioned our project to redirect us into the login page once we submit the registration form. So let's go ahead and create the login logout system. So yeah. Alright, let's go ahead and open our project. Let's go inside urls.py, and here we will import the login logout view that we have already built in Django. And first of all, let's just import the views from django.contrib.auth import views. So we don't want these views to be messed up with other views, so let's import it as auth views, and let's add the URL paths now. Let's say for login, then we will add the auth views, and here I will call the login view, and we want it as view, and I'm gonna render one template over here, and I'm gonna add the template name as login html.html. Alright, now one more thing, I will here add the name to be login. Alright, now similarly I will do the same thing for logout. Alright, let's replace it with logout, then again log out view, then this would be our logout.html, and this is gonna be logout. Alright, but as of now I don't have any templates called login or logout, so let's go ahead and create these templates, and I will go inside my template folder, create one HTML file, call it login, and I will create another HTML file, log out. Let's go ahead and create our login.html page. First of all, I will extend the base file here, extend base.html. Alright, now after this I will add the crispy form tags, load. All right, load crispy tags. Okay, let's load the static folder as well. All right, let's go ahead and start our block content. Block content, and let's end it over here, and block content. All right, now I will add my login form here. Let's start with a div, and I will start my form. So this is basically the same kind of form that we are using in register. So I'll just copy this and paste it over there, and yeah, so let's just copy and paste the style from here, and let's add the navigation bar here. Let's include the navigation bar, nav_bar.html. all right, now I have my navigation bar over here. I have my form, and my form is taking the post method, and I have added the CSRF token over here as well. So yeah, so instead of sign up, I'm gonna say log in. All right, now let's save it. Let's go to logout now. Let's clear everything here. Let's extend the base file. Extends base.html. Let's include the block content. Block content over here. Let's just end it right away. And block content. Now I'm gonna add the navigation bar over here. I'm gonna include nav_bar.html. Alright, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna display one message over here, and this is just gonna say you are logged in. Let's add it inside paragraph, and okay, let's save it. Now before we start our server, let's go ahead and do some configurations inside our main settings.py folder. We have to add one configuration here, and let's copy and paste it, and I'll explain what's going on over here. So basically here we are telling Django to use Bootstrap 4 for crispy template pack, and in these two lines we are saying that login page, once the login form is submitted, we want Django to redirect us to home, and login URL is defined here as login. Let's go ahead and start our server now. Let's stop it and clear the screen and restart the server. Hit enter. Alright, everything is working fine. Let's go ahead and start from the register page. Alright, we are in the register page. We are going to create one user. Let's say Intel1. email ID is intel1@sample.com. Let's create one password, say hit enter. So we are in the login page now, as you can see, but we will change this legend. And alright, let's just try and log in with the user that we have just created. Hit enter. Yes, we are in the home page now. We are logged in. So now we want the navigation bar to display logout and user profile option over here, so that we get to create our post from our profiles. And also once we are done, we can log out from here itself. So let's get back to our project, and now basically we are gonna create one user authentication system. So when the user is going to be logged in, the navigation bar will display options such as home, about, logout and user profile, not sign up and login, because user is already going to be logged in, right? And when the user is not logged in, we want the navigation bar to display options such as home, about, sign up and login option. So basically that is our requirement. And let's get back to the project. Let's open the navigation bar .html, and we will make some changes over here. So basically we want more navigation bar options over here. Let's copy and paste. So when the user is going to be logged in, we want home, about, profile and logout. But when the user is not going to be logged in, then we want it to display the sign up and login option as well, and login option. Alright, so my navigation bar should always have two options, which are home and about. Let's go ahead and separate these two. And okay, I'll be adding the URLs here as well. Let's go ahead and add it. URL, it should go to home and about. Okay, we don't have any about page yet, but I'm gonna create it after this. All right, and then I'm gonna check if the user is authenticated. If it is, then we'll have options such as profile and logout in my navigation bar. So let's go ahead and add this condition: user is authenticated. Then should display these two options. Yeah, so profile and logout, and I'll add the URL over here. I have to create user profiles after this. Yes, so profile is linked, then I'll add the URL to my logout page as well. So URL and logout. Alright, now if the user is not authenticated, then the navigation bar should display options such as sign up and login. So let's go ahead and add this condition, else display this. Alright, and I'll add the URLs over here, and it should go to user applications. Alright, it's inside user register, right? So let's go ahead and add the login page URL as well, and login. Yes, let's save it. So let's go ahead and create one new application called about, so that we can display our about view over there. And let's clear the screen. Let's start a new app, manage.py, start app. Let's call it about, hit enter. Let's go back to our project, and as you can see, we have a new application over here. So I'll just head on to my project directory over here, and I'll just copy the URL file and paste it over there, application. So let's get back to the project. Yes, as you can see, my url.py file is copied over here. So now let's go ahead and add our new application in the configurations. Let's go ahead and open settings.py, and I'll add this new application in my installed apps list, and this is about. All right, let's go ahead and create view and the template that we are gonna render over there. Let's go ahead and create the view. So over here, let's define a view function. Let's call it about. So it's gonna take a request and it's gonna render one HTML file, which will be called as about.html, and we are not gonna pass any context over here. So let's go ahead and create the template, and I'll open template and create a new HTML file, and I'll call it about. Let's remove all of this and extend my base file over here. Let's start my blog content. Let's end it here. Alright, let's go ahead and call the navigation bar as well. Let's include the navigation bar. Include my navigation bar is in my nav underscore bar.html file. So I just want to display a simple sentence over here. I'll just add a paragraph tag, and let's say this is about us. Alright, so in my about page, this simple sentence will show up. Let's go ahead and create the URL path in my main application, which is project, and I will add one URL path over here for my about page, and this will go like this, about, and it will include my URLs file inside my about application. So basically, when somebody is gonna land in this URL path, it's gonna point to my URLs folder inside my about page. So let's go ahead and see what we have inside the URLs page. So we need to change this view. Our view about view is called about, and let's name it about. Alright, and we can remove this part from here, and let's save it. Let's go ahead and open our browser and just check if the about page is working out. Alright, let's run our server once again. Yes, we don't have any profile yet, so it's showing error. Let's just create the profile, and then we'll check if the pages are working or not. So let's go ahead and create user profile. So now we want our user profile to display one form which will allow users to post their thoughts into the database. So basically, in order to do that, I have to create one model form, and in order to create the model form, I need to start with creating a model over here. So I'll just add a model with some fields inside my users application. So let's go ahead and create our model class. Let's call it post, and this should be a subclass of models.model. Yes. So let's say I want my model to contain some fields such as character field or text field. So I'll just copy and paste it over here, and I'll explain what's going on. My model contains a username, and which is a character field. The maximum length of my character field is 200. This cannot be null. So next I have the post title, and this will contain this is basically the character field as well. So the maximum limit is 200, and this cannot be null as well. Next I have post content. So this is going to be a text field, and here we don't need to mention any character limits. So since my post can have a big amount of characters, big number of characters, right, comparing to username and post title, so we are using text field rather than using character field over here. So next we have date published. So this is going to be a date field, and again last I have user profile link, where user can add their user profile or social media profile over here. So this is going to be a URL field. So these things can be null, but the main content cannot be null, such as username, post title, or post content. So let's go ahead and save it. Alright, now let's head on to forms, and let's create one model form over here. So first of all, let's go ahead and import our newly created model, which is post, and I will create a model form over here. Class, let's call it post form, and this is going to be a subclass of forms dot model form. Alright, now I want this parent class to have data from a meta class. So let's go ahead and create my meta class, and I will add the model as post that we have just created. And next, the fields will have a list of fields such as username and post title, and then we have post content, right? Post content, what else is there? And date published and user profile link. All right, then we have date published, and last one is user profile link. All right, let's go ahead and save it. All right, now let's head on to views, and let's create a view over here. And before we create a view from the model form that we've just created, we need to import it from .forms import post form, right? Yes. So let's go ahead and create our view function. Let's define it as profile, and this is going to be taking a request, of course, and then I can just copy and paste this part from here, and yeah, this is basically same, but I'll replace it with post form. This is going to take yes post request, and if the form is valid, it's gonna save it, but we are not gonna redirect it to anywhere. So we want the user profile to display a new model form where user can post another thought right after one thought has been posted. So in order to do that, I have to add form post form here, and so we will return and render, and then we will head on to profile template HTML. Then we will render context, which is going to be our form. All right, let's go ahead and save this file. Add a space over here. Yeah, let's save it. So user can only access a user profile once logged in. So in order to add that extra functionality, so we will be using something known as decorator. So in order to do that, I will import from Django dot contrib dot author and then decorator. So I will import the login required decorator and I'm going to use it above this view function. And so this is gonna add one extra functionality to the function added right below it. So basically let's save it and let's go back to our alright, wait, we need to create a profile template as well. Let's go ahead and quickly create profile template. So let's remove everything from here. Let's extend our base file. So let's start the block content and let's end the block content so that we don't forget it afterwards. So end block content. So and inside this I will include my navigation bar, include navigation nav bar.html. Alright, now so the form that we are going to display over here is gonna look like this form, which will take post method, then let's close the tag, and since we are using post method we have to use csrf token. Then I'm gonna render my form over here. Yes, we will load the crispy forms tags as well so that our form looks nice. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's load crispy forms tags. Alright, let's add a filter over here which is gonna say just crispy. Alright, let's move ahead, and we have to add one input here. So this is gonna be of type submit, and it's gonna save a value, and I will just save this. Alright, in order to avoid the overlapping of navigation bar and my rest of the forms, so I'll just include this inside a div, and this is gonna be over here, and I'll add some styles which I've already added in my rest of the forms. So let's just copy from one of them. Yes, let's copy and paste it over there. Let's save it, and now we can run our server again. Let's clear the screen, let's run it again. Alright, before we run it, since we have modified the models .py file, we have to perform migration. So let's go ahead and perform migration first. Python manage.py make migrations, hit enter. So yes, you can see one migration file has been created for us. So let's go ahead and migrate it, manage.py and migrate. Let's hit enter, and yes, everything looks fine. Let's clear the screen and run our server. Run server, enter. Alright, everything looks fine. Let's go ahead to our browser, head on to our first page. Oh, it's throwing one error. Alright, so it's saying that we have not added an if in our template file. So let's go ahead to navigation bar. Yes, we forgot to add the and if type over here. Let's end it and let's save it now, and let's go back to our command prompt. Let's run the server again. It says it looks fine. Let's hit enter. Another trouble. Alright, reverse for profile not found. So this is basically because yes, we have not added the profile URL yet. So let's go ahead and add it, and let's call it profile, and I will remove this from here, and I'm just gonna import the user views, and I have users import views. I'll import it as, let's call it users view. Alright, users view, and I'll add this inside my profile views. Users views dot profile is going to be my view. Alright, let's go ahead and name it. Let's call it profile so that our URL can detect it. Profile. Alright, let's save it, and now let's clear the screen and run server again. Let's go back to our browser. Let's hit enter. Yes, everything is working fine. Let's go ahead and log out. Yes, my logout option is not working. Let's see what happened here. Let's go back to our project and let's click on logout HTML. So alright, let's just go ahead and remove this part. I don't think we need that. Let's go ahead and save it, and let's go back to our command prompt. Let's clear the screen. Let's run the server again. It seems to be working fine. Let's refresh it. Alright, so we are in our home page, and the about page is also live, and let's just register it. Let's call it dummy1. Let's say dummy1 example.com. Alright, let's add a password. Alright, I messed up here. Let's go ahead and do this again. Alright, so I'm in. I can log in with dummy1, and let's go ahead and try login. Alright, so we are logged in. As you can see, my navigation bar is showing a profile and logout option over here. So let's just try and click on profile, and yes, I have a form where I can post my thoughts from. So, and I can click on logout. Okay, so this is showing you are logged in, but it should have been you are logged out. Let's just fix it, and you are logged out. Alright, let's refresh it. Okay, so let's try and log in again, and we'll just try to post one of our thoughts here. Let's let's click on profile. Let's say dummy1 is going to post something. Post name is something, let's say blah blah blah, and date published is 2019. Let's say 18. Alright, let's go ahead and add a profile link. Let's say http://www.intellipaat.com. Alright, let's save it, and as you can see, once we save it, a newly created or a fresh model form is displayed over here, so that we can post our new thought. So let's go ahead and log out. So basically we are going to render the post that we have just posted from our database to our dashboard or our home. So we are going to display it over here, and let's try and do that. So let's go ahead and head on to our home application, and we need to create one view over there. So basically we are going to be using a class based view, so which is a generic built-in view provided by Django. So we're going to import it, Django dot views dot generic, and import the list view. All right, let's go ahead and create a context over here so that we can, let's say context 1, and I'll add it inside a dictionary. Let's add a key value, say post, and I'm gonna be displaying all the objects from the post. Alright, let's go ahead and render this context, and I'm just gonna say context 1. Alright, so this is gonna be posting. Alright, I need to import my post over here as well, since I'm using my post module here. So basically I will just import, then from there I will import models, and from there I'll import the post. Alright, so now I will just go ahead and create the class post list view, and I will inherit it from list view, and let's add some data here. Let's call it model, and this will be post, and the template name is gonna be my homepage.html, homepage.html. all right, let's remove this extra space over here, and now I need to add a context object name, which is gonna be the post that I was adding the key name here. Yeah, this is gonna be my context object name, and then I am gonna be displaying all the objects according to the date published. Alright, so let's just say date published. Alright, so let's just save it, and let's go back to our home template. I will open it. Now I will add the section for displaying my post over here. So let's go ahead and copy this part, and I'll explain what's going on over here. So yeah, so once we land on our home page, it's gonna say hello everyone, and here are your recent posts after this. So basically here we are looping over the object which is called post, and we are going to be displaying one post at a time inside this division. So say I want to display the post title from my post object, so I'll be using this tag which is going to be called as post.post title. So similarly for posting for displaying the date published, we'll be using this tag, and for post content I have used one paragraph and styled it a bit. You can just copy it and or you can style it on your own. So let's just go ahead and see our, yes, if we want to display the username as well, so we can similarly use this tag. So let's say we want the user's profile linked over there as well, so we can use this tag inside a tag. So basically this is the configuration that we had to do inside our home.html page. So let's go ahead and refresh our command prompt. So let's just run the server once again, enter. Let's go ahead and refresh it. Alright, we are getting one error over here. Alright, so let's go back to our project and let's see inside home views.py. Okay, this should be objects, not object. So let's save it and let's go back to command prompt and let's clear the screen and let's run the server once again. Python manage.py and run server. Alright, so it looks fine. Let's go back to the browser, enter. Okay, so inside the template we missed one thing. We forgot to end the for loop. So let's go ahead and yes, we forgot to end the for loop. Let's end it over here. And alright, let's save it. Let's refresh it. Yes, it looks fine, and the post that we posted from dummy1 is being posted over here. So alright, let's go back to our project, and so now let's post another one and let's use the same account. Alright, let's go ahead and head on to profiles. Let's say dummy1 is again posted something new. Then let's say date published, let's say 2019 and let's say 19. Alright, let's just add one again. Let's just add simple URL and let's go to our home. Yes, as you can see, our new post is being displayed over here. Alright, then everything looks fine here. Let's go ahead and create the API and head on to our project. Yes, let's go ahead and create a new application for API. Let's clear the prompt and let's create a new application. Python manage.py start app and let's name it API. Enter. Let's go back to project. As you can see, API has been created here, and let's copy and paste the URL over there. Alright, let's copy the urls.py and paste it over there. Alright, let's go back to our project. So before we move forward, we have to install Django REST framework. So in order to do that, we have to head on to our command prompt. Let's go ahead and do that. Pip install Django REST framework. Alright, hit enter. So yeah, I have a Django REST framework already installed. If you don't have it, then here's the command that you need to use. So let's go ahead and go back to our project. First of all, we'll be creating one new Python file over there, and let's name it serializer. Hit enter. So what I'll be doing here is I will import the post model from my users model, and also I will import REST framework and the serializers. So basically I'll be using model serializer to serialize the data. So basically what's happening here is model serializer will serialize the data of post model into JSON format. So basically I'm trying to create one serializer here with the name post serializer, and I will be inheriting it from model serializer. So, and the data that I'll be passing here is going to be provided by meta class. The model is going to be post, and the fields that I want here are let's name this field here username, then I have a post title, then I have date published, yes, and also I have user profile link. Did I miss something? And yeah, I missed the post content. Let's add it over here. Alright, let's go ahead and save it. So basically we will be serializing these data into a JSON format. So let's save it. Now I will head on to views.py and I will create a view set for our API. So here I will be importing the post model, and let's do that. First of all, I will use users.models import post, and then I will also import the serializer that we've just created, serializers, and import. Alright, this is going to be dot serializer, not the inbuilt serializer. I will import the serializer that we've just created, post serializer. Alright, and last but not the least, I have to import the model view set that I'll be using over here, and this is inside REST framework dot view set, import model view set. Alright, let's go ahead and create our view set, and let's create it post view set, and I will be inheriting it from model view set. Now let's go ahead and type the query set over here, and I will be using the data from post model. I want objects, all objects from post model, and I want it ordered by ID. So ordered by this is going to be ordered by and ID. So let's say I want first 10 values, so this is going to be mentioned over here. So then I will be mentioning which serializer class that Django needs to use. So the serializer class that we've just created over here, so let's mention it over there, and let's save it. Alright, now let's go ahead and set the URLs. So basically in APIs we don't use the conventional URL format, so we are going to be using routers instead. So let's go ahead and let's remove all of this, and let's go ahead import REST framework, and from there we'll import the routers, and we'll be using simple router over here. So from views we will be views, we will be importing the post view set that we just created. So we will create an instance from the simple router, and this is going to be simple router, and then we will register the router dot register, and we will pass the post and the post view set. So this is gonna be our additional URL path that API is gonna create for us. And last thing we need to do is URL pattern setting. URL patterns is gonna be your router.urls. So that's it. Let's save this, and before moving ahead we have to register this API inside our main application. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll just register it API. Now let's go ahead and run our server just to check if things are working fine. Manage.py run server. Yes, everything is working fine. Alright, now in order to check the request method such as post or get, we will be heading to one software called Postman. Let's open it. Yes, we are inside this software, and let's create one request. Let's name it test1 and we want it inside. Okay, I have already one project folder, and I will save this project and I will add the URL over here, and I'll copy and paste it over there. Okay, but we didn't register the API URL in our main application, so let's go back and register the application URL here. Yes, we forgot to add it. Let's add the URL for our API, and this is gonna include API.urls. Alright, let's save it. We have a error here. Let's see what it is. Okay, we need to add a comma here. Let's save this project, and yes, everything is working fine. Let's go back to Postman and let's send a request. Alright, we will be sending request. Let's call it API and post. Since we have mentioned the URLs here as post, and we will be sending the request using this, so let's go ahead and send get request, and let's see. Yes, we have two data records here, and these records are displayed over here. Alright, let's go ahead and send a post request, and in order to do that I will select post here, and I will go to body and I will select form data, and here I will add my fields. My field names are username, post title, post content, date published, and user profile link. Alright, let's add some values here. Let's add the username to be Intellipaat, and let's say this is a blog post, and let's say post content is Python Django. Date published is 2019 10/08. Let's add the URL path to the www.intellipaat.com. Alright, let's go ahead and send this post request. Alright, this is done. In order to check if this post request has been sent successfully or not, let's go ahead and create another get request, and as you can see, our new post has been created successfully.
In this session, we'll be discussing some of the most frequently asked and important questions in any Django interview. Now, I'm sure if you go through with all of these questions, you'll be able to crack your next Django interview. So let us begin. So the first question is, what is Django? Now, Django is a server-side web application framework written in Python. So any web application usually consists of two parts, the client side and the server side. The client side is any application which can request data from a server. This could be a web application being run in a web browser. It could be an Android application, an iOS application, or any other kind of application which can request data from the server. The server, on the other hand, is just a server which is running an application which is written in a server-side language such as PHP, Python, Ruby, and so on. So the job of the server-side application is to respond to these requests. So the server-side application will take the request, get the appropriate data from the database if required, construct a response, and then send it back in an appropriate format to the client. Now, Django is written in Python. Now, Python is one of the most easy to use and popular languages out there. So because of this, Django is quite easy to use, and which is why it is one of the most popular web application frameworks being used today. Now let us move on to the next question. Which architectural pattern does Django follow? So Django follows the model view template architectural pattern, which is quite similar to the model view controller architectural pattern. For those of you who are unaware of this, an architectural pattern is just a way of constructing your code or managing your code. So by separating your code into smaller pieces, it becomes easier to create bigger projects. And for that we use an architectural pattern. So an architectural pattern like model view controller consists of three parts: a model, a view, and a controller. So any code that deals with data and the business logic. So a code that deals with data manipulation, data validation, user authentication, anything that deals with the data is considered to be part of the model. Similarly, views are the UI elements, the buttons, the forms, the images which the user sees and interacts with. And the controller is the glue that sits between the model and the view. So whenever the user interacts with the view, the controller receives the request, fetches the data from the model if necessary, and creates a new view or updates the view with the data that it receives from the model. Now, the MVT architecture that Django follows is quite similar to the MVC architecture. Django calls models models, views are called templates in Django, and a controller in Django is called a view. So that's just a difference in the nomenclature of these application frameworks. Otherwise, the functionality is exactly the same. So let us move on to the next question. What is the difference between a project and an app in Django? So in Django, a project is the entire application and an app is a module inside the project that deals with one specific requirements. So for instance, let's say you were creating an e-commerce site as an entire project. In that e-commerce site, there are several features that you need to implement, such as the retailer's site, in which the retailers could log in, add the products that they wish to sell, and then log out. Similarly, the buyer's site, in which the buyers would log in, add the products that they wish to buy in their cart, and then buy those products and then log out. So instead of implementing all of these functionalities in a single code base, in a single app, what we can do is separate all of these functionalities into smaller components or modules called apps. That way, several teams can work on single applications without worrying about the other application. So for instance, let's say that you have a team working on the retail site app. Now, any change made to this code base will not affect the code written for the buyer site app, and vice versa. So this is why we use apps and projects in Django. So to put it simply, a project is your entire application and an app is a single functionality or a module in your application. Let us move on to the next question. What is Django's admin interface? So Django comes with a fully customizable inbuilt admin interface, which lets us see and make changes to the data in the database of a registered application and its models. So if you were to use any other application framework such as Laravel, Ruby on Rails, Spring, etc., you would have to create your own admin interface, or you can use a package to install and configure the admin. But in Django, the admin interface comes inbuilt. So for instance, if you have an application in which there's a database and you wish to interact with it more visually, you can use Django's admin interface. So for instance, I have created a sample application which is a simple blog post in which you can post a single blog article and you can edit it and delete it. It's quite basic. So for the admin to be able to recognize your database table and use it, you need to first go to your application's admin.site.register or the admin.py file and add the admin.site.register and the model names in parentheses. That way, in your blog application, you have registered your post model, which is this one. Now, what we can do is we can go to the application. As you can see, there are 5 posts so far. Now, if I wish to add another post, I can create a new post like this, or if I wish to use the Django's admin interface. Let's say I haven't created the form yet. So what I can do is I can go to the admin login, click on posts, click on add posts, and then add the title, add the body, and then I can just save it. As you can see, the post was successfully created. Now if I go to the post, I can edit it right here, or what I can do, look at the application and you can see my sample blog post was created successfully. So instead of having to implement this functionality from scratch, Django gives this functionality to us for free. And one of the most important features of this is you can track the changes that you have made so far. So for instance, you can see that I have created an object, another object, another object. These are just articles that I created, and then I deleted one of the articles, then deleted another article. That way you can keep track of the changes that you have made, and you can edit the data that's being inserted. So let us move on to the next question. The next question asks us to explain the request response cycle in Django. So in Django, a request response cycle basically means how the request enters the Django application, how it's converted into the response, and the response is sent back to the user. So the first thing that happens is the user enters the URL of our application. The URL is then received by our server, which will match the URL with a list of existing URL patterns. If a match is not found, then a response of 404 is sent back to the user. Similarly, if a match is found, then we will use the registered view that's registered with the URL pattern that matched, and then execute the code inside it to generate a response and send back. So for instance, we have a sample application. In this is the urls.py file, or the base URL file of our project. Any request that comes to our application will first hit this file. So for instance, let's say that we go to our base URL. A base URL is basically your site's domain. If you've deployed your site, then it's the domain name that your site uses, like www.simpleblog.com or anything else. Right now we are testing things out on our local machine, so it's localhost :8000, which is the port number. So we make a request. This request goes to the URLs file. Now simply because it's just a base URL, it will look at the empty string. If for instance the URL was /admin or /API or any other string appended to the base URL, the application will look at other URLs such as admin, API, and if the appended URI matches to the registered URL, then that view would be called. Right now, since it's the base name, we call blog.urls, which is the blog application's URLs file, which is this. Inside it, since again it's the base URL, this empty string will be evaluated, and inside the views file, the post list view is created. This is the post list view. In this, what we do is we define the model, the template, the context object name, and the ordering. And according to the code, the response is generated. This is an HTML response, and it's sent back to the user. And we have all our posts formatted nicely as the response. Let us move on to the next question. What is a model in Django? So a model is simply a Python class that is derived from django.db.models.model class. You can think of a model as a representation of our table. The fields in the class of a model are the fields that will be used in the database. So for instance, our blog model, which is this one, the post model, this inherits from django.db.models.model, and inside it we have described a title and a body. These are used to create and map database entities to our table. So let's move on to the next question. Okay, so let us move on to the next question. The next question is, what are migrations in Django? So a migration is a simple Python file that contains the changes that we make to our models. These files are then evaluated by Django and are converted into our database schema. So instead of manually running SQL queries and making changes to our database schema, like adding a row, deleting a row, adding a column, deleting a column, adding a foreign key, so on and so forth, what we can do is just make changes to our models in our Python code, then create or generate a migration based on that model, and then that migration is then run to make changes to our database. So for instance, in our post model we have the title, which is a character field, and a body, which is a text field. So what we do is we create the model, we save it, and then we generate a migration which is saved in the migrations folder in the same application. And as you can see, the name of the table is the same as the name of the model, which is post. Then there's an ID field which is added by default, which is used as the primary key. Similarly, we have the title and the body. This is then run by our Django application to create or make changes to our database schema. Now, this allows us to make changes to our Python file and have these changes reflect back on our database without us having to write a single line of SQL query. So let us move on to the next question. So what are views in Django? So as we have seen, models are used to deal with the data, and views are used in Django as controllers. So views are used to get data from the model and display them to the template. A view is basically a class or a function that receives the request and then returns the response. A view is usually associated with a URL pattern which is matched by the Django application, and then the logic encapsulated in that view is run when the URL matches. A view, among other things, gets data from the models and passes the data to the templates for them to render, and then converts that to an HTTP response and sends it back to the user. So for instance, as you can see in our application, we get a GET request to the blogs.urls file. Then this is the view that is used to generate the response and send it back to the user. Inside the view, this is the model that is being used to get data from, and this is the template in which the data is being passed as. So let's open the template and see. The template is basically just looping over all the posts and creating or generating the HTML content and then sending it back as an HTTP response. Now this is all handled by the view. A view's job is simply to sit between the model and the template and interact with each other. So let us move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is the use of the include function in the urls.py file in Django? So as we know that each Django project contains several applications. Now instead of registering all the URLs for all the applications in a single file, what we can do is make each application contain its own urls.py file, and then the base url.py file will reference these application specific URLs file to get the list of valid URLs that these applications can respond to. So this is done by the include function. So for instance, as you can see in this registered URL, what we do is if any request comes to our base URL, it will be handled by the blog applications URLs file. This string represents the blog folder and the URLs file. So as you can see, this is the blog folder. Inside it we have a urls.py file, which is this one, and in this we have registered some of the URLs. So if a request comes to localhost /8000/new, post create view will be responsible for generating the response. So in this we give it the template, the form class, the success URL, and so on and so forth. Any other parameter that is needed can be defined here. So when we go to localhost/new, this form is generated and sent back as the response. This is done by our post create view, which is routed to by our application's URL file. So we use the include function to include each application's specific URL file into the main URL file. So let's move on to the next question. Why is Django called a loosely coupled framework? So Django is called a loosely coupled framework because of its MVT architecture. As we've discussed before, MVC is just a slight variation on the MVC architecture. It helps in separating the server code from the client code. So Django's models and views take care of the code that needs to be run on the server, like getting records from the database, and the templates are mostly the HTML and CSS files that needs the data being passed from the model to themselves so that they can render them. So it's called a loosely coupled framework because these components of our MVT architecture can work independent of each other. So for instance, if I were to make some changes to our models.py file by making changes on how it gets the results from the database, that will have no effect on our templates. Similarly, if we make changes to our controller, which is responsible for getting data from the model and passing it down the template, that will also have no effect on our templates, since these parts are usually independent from each other, which is why Django is called a loosely coupled framework. Now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is Django ORM? ORM stands for an object relational mapper. Now this term sounds quite intimidating, but it's fairly easy to understand. So instead of interacting with the database by writing raw SQL queries and converting the data that is returned from the query into Python objects like we would have to do if we were building any kind of web application written in Python, we can use an ORM, which allows us to interact with the database using objects of our model class. So we interact with our models and the ORM converts these changes into SQL queries based on the database we are using, like SQLite, MS SQL, MySQL, etc. The ORM will take care of the changes in the database. So for instance, if we were to use MySQL in an application that's already being run on SQLite, our ORM will adjust the queries for us. So let us take a look at the example. So here I have a simple application. I will create a shell environment in which I will be using this application. So let me first import the models that we'll be using. Now, as you can see, if I want to get all the records in the database, what I can do in simple Python terms, I can just use the methods on the class. So these are all the posts that are available in our database. As you can see, I did not have to write a single SQL query. All of this was managed by our ORM. This can also be used to create new objects, save it to the database, retrieve single objects, like if we use post.objects.filter, get the response as the row that has primary key 1, and we get a single response from the ORM. They are used to get the data from the database and convert them into the Python objects that we can use in our Django application. So let's move on to the next question, which is, how do templates work in Django? Now, templates are used to dynamically generate web content. Django's templating engine handles templating that involves parsing, processing, and then converting the template into an appropriate HTTP response that is sent back to the client. These templates by default are written in Django templating language, although you can switch to another templating language like Jinja 2, which is a popular templating language in the Python world. Now, these templates will allow us to generate dynamic content based on the data we pass into the templates by the view. So, for example, in this application, in our view, we get the data from our post model. Then we send the data to the index template. As you can see that these are all the static content. So for h1, closing h1, another h1, these are all static content, and anything that's wrapped in a curly brace or two curly braces, these are all Python's or Django's templating language constructs. So in this, what we're doing is we're looping over all the posts and dynamically creating a new blog post which can be then rendered in our template. So we loop over all the posts, display the current post's title and current post's body. So for instance, if we have 10 posts, then it will be looped over 10 times, and 10 HTML div items with the post wrapper class and title and body will be generated. Then this is sent back to the user, and what the user gets is this page. As you can see, all of the posts are in the exact format that the template described, and everything is rendered as the template was created. So let's move on to the next question. So how do we register a model with the Django admin? So to register a model with the Django admin, we need to make some changes to our application's admin.py file. This file is automatically generated by Django, so we don't have to create it ourselves, although we do have to make some changes in it to register our model with the admin, which will give admin the permissions, or it will make the admin interface aware of the model that we wish for it to use. So for example, if suppose we had a polls application, we'll open the polls application's admin.py file, import the model. Let's say the model's name is question and we wish to register it, so we'll write the code admin.site.register, and in the brackets we'll write question because register is a method, and then this will end up registering our questions model with our admin site. Then we can log into our admin site and then use the admin interface to make changes and get the data from this model. So for example, as you can see, we have our application. Inside it, when we look into our application's admin.py file, which is this one, as you can see, I have registered the post model, which is what enabled us to log into our admin site and then use the post database object. Now, for instance, if I were to create another model, the admin will not automatically pick it up. Then I'll have to go back into that application's admin.py file, type in admin.site.register and import the model and then register the model like this. Then and only then will our application use the model with the admin. So let's move on to the next question. How do we generate a super user in Django? Now, a super user is basically the admin. So the credentials for super user are generated by using a Python command in which we use the manage.py script in the command prompt. So we type Python manage.py create super user, all lowercase with no spaces in between and without the quotes. Then the command will ask us for some information like the username, the email, and finally it will ask us to enter the information about the passwords 2 times for confirmation. This will create a super user for our Django project. So for instance, if I were to create another super user for this application, what I can do is type py. So in our command prompt, what we need to do is we need to type the command py. Do make sure that if you are using Ubuntu or Macintosh, you need to type in the complete command with Python. Since I'm using Windows, I can type py manage.py create super user, all lowercase, no caps, no spaces. I click enter and it asks me for the username. Let's call it test. Email address, I write test@example.com. It doesn't really have to be a real email address because we're using it for testing purposes. For password, I'm simply going to write a small password similarly. Now, in a production environment, it is usually considered a bad practice to use small passwords. However, for our use case, it's quite alright. So the Django is giving us all of these errors, or rather the warnings, which tell us that we need a more stronger password, a more stronger username and stuff like that, but we can use it here because it's just for testing purposes. So we created the super user successfully. Now if we run the server again and then go back to our site and now use our test credentials to log in, as you can see, I have been able to log in using the user that I created right in front of you. So that's how you create a super user in Python. Moving on to the next question. So the next question is mention some disadvantages of Django. Django has the following disadvantages. Django's modules are quite bulky. Now this is a disadvantage if you're building a really small application, because you'll have to manage a lot more code than you would typically have to if you were building it from scratch, that is without using the Django framework. For instance, if you were building a really small to-do application which will just store the things that you need to do in an entire day in the database and then deleting those things once you have done them. So for doing such a small application, for building such a small application, using Django might be a bit of an overkill. The next disadvantage is it is completely based on Django's ORM. So if you were not quite fond of Django's ORM, if you were uncomfortable with it and wanted to use another ORM written in Python, Django doesn't allow for you to do that because Django's entire ecosystem is quite tightly bound with the Django ORM. So if you were to replace it with another ORM, it will not work. So unless you are comfortable with Django ORM, using Django could be a bit of a difficulty. The next disadvantage is components are deployed together. So in Django, all the components are deployed together. Even if you were to make a small change to one of the smaller components, you will still have to redeploy the entire application together with all the components, which could be a little difficult if your application is quite big. Now the last disadvantage is we must know the full system to work with it. So if you were unaware of how the model view template architecture works, how does the request gets into the application, how is it converted into the response, what steps are taken, how does it match the URLs, so on and so forth, it would be difficult for you to create an application in Django because you will have difficulty figuring out where to add what code in order for your application to run. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is sessions framework in Django? So in Django, sessions framework is used to store arbitrary information about the user on the server in the database. Sessions are mostly used to differentiate logged in user from users that are not logged in, as in guest users. This is mainly done because HTTP protocol, which is used by all the web applications out there, is a stateless protocol, which basically means that requests do not store information about subsequent requests. So for example, let's say that I log into an application by sending it my username and password. So the server will receive my request for logging in with my username and password. It will verify my credentials and log me in and send back a response of HTTP 200, which means everything went fine. Now whatever request I send after that, HTTP has no way of storing information about me being logged in or logged out. So any request that I send after that using HTTP will not be taken as an authorized request or a request from an authorized user. So to overcome this problem, we use sessions. Sessions basically work by storing a special session ID into the user's browser using a cookie. This session ID is just an arbitrarily long string with alphanumeric characters. Whenever the user is logged in and he sends any request after that, this session ID is included in the request. Then the application will look into the database, look if the session ID is there and it's valid, as in the user has not been logged out yet, and then that user request is treated as a request from a logged in user. The session ID also helps the application to figure out the user's name, user ID, and any other information about the user that may be relevant, which can be used for authorizing actions on the application. So let us move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is a cookie in Django? A cookie is just a small piece of information that is stored in the client's browser. It is used to store users' data in a file permanently or for a specified amount of time. A cookie has an expiration date and time, and it gets removed automatically when it gets expired. Django provides inbuilt methods for setting and fetching the cookies. As we saw in the previous question, cookies are quite important for the sessions framework to work. Cookies are used to store the user's session ID, which is then used to authenticate and authorize the user as a logged in user. Now, cookies can be used to store any piece of information on the client's browser. However, it should be noted that storing non-sensitive piece of information in cookies is quite alright. However, storing information that is sensitive, like user's password, user's credit card information, or any other information that we wish to keep private, should not be stored on the cookies. As cookies are stored on the client side, any user who has access to user's browser can access the cookie and get the information from the cookie. Moving on to the next question. What is a middleware in Django? So a middleware is just a layer in Django's request response processing pipeline. As a request enters our Django application and the response is sent back to the user, there are certain steps that Django takes. These steps are arranged in a pipeline, and each step in the pipeline is called a middleware. Each middleware is responsible for performing a specific function on the request and or the response. So functions such as caching and gzipping are part of the request response pipeline. For instance, if we were to authenticate the user, we can use Django's authentication middleware. So for example, let me show you. So in our application's settings.py file, as we can see, we have a list of installed apps, and right below that we have a list of middlewares. These middlewares are the layers in our request response pipeline. So what happens is a request enters our application and it is then processed by each of these layers, and if all of these layers pass the request and pass the response, if the middleware is supposed to access the response, then the response is sent back to the user. Otherwise, if there's an error, that error is sent back to the user. So for instance, this middleware is for authenticating the user. So any request that can only be sent by an authenticated user, like editing a blog post, this is taken care of by this middleware. And there are other middlewares regarding security and performance and so on and so forth. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is a query set in Django? So a query set in Django is basically a collection of objects from our database. Query sets are used by the Django ORM. Remember, ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. When we use our models to get a single record or a group of records from the database, they are returned as query sets. So Django's ORM, after fetching the records from the database, fetches them in a type which is known as query set. Let me show you. So as you can see, I am in our application and I'll run the shell to show you how query sets are being used. So let us first try to import our model. So from blog.models import post. Now if we try to fetch all the records from the database using post.object.all, you can see that we are getting back a result set in the form of a query set. Similarly, if you were to fetch a single record from the database, such as post.objects.filter, get a record with the primary key of 1, we get a single response from the database which is wrapped in a query set. These query sets are used by Django's ORM to perform filtering and querying to the data that is returned back from the database. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is Django REST framework? So the Django REST framework is just a Django app which is also a framework that lets us create a RESTful API rapidly. Django REST framework is especially useful if we have an existing Django web application and we wish to quickly generate an API for it. For those of you who are not aware of this, a REST API is basically a web API that allows any other sort of client, such as an Android application, an iOS application, or any other application, to access the information on our server. So for instance, let's say we were to create an Android application. That application would need to get data from our server, and it does that by sending an HTTP request to our REST API. Now Django REST framework makes creating a REST API out of an existing Django application quite easy, which is why we use the Django REST framework. Let's move on to the next question. What is a context in Django? So when we are rendering a template, certain parameters or data need to be passed to the template by the view. That data is passed in a dictionary as in the Python dictionary type, and that dictionary variable is called a context. A context is basically just a dictionary in which the keys represent the variable names and the value represent the values of those variables. This dictionary is used by the templates to output dynamic content. So for example, in our application, when we look into our views file, as you can see that we have this context object name. Similarly, the context object name is here as well. So let's look into the blog index.html. We go to the templates. Inside blog, we have index.html. We open it, and as you can see that this variable name matches exactly our context object name. So as you can see, posts and posts. So what happens is, after fetching all the data from the database, the view passes all the records or the posts in a dictionary named posts when rendering our template. Then in the template we loop over all the posts and display the data. So a context is basically just a dictionary with key values, where the key represent the variable name and the values represent our values for those variables. This is then used by our templates to generate the dynamic content that we need. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, list some of the caching strategies that Django supports. So Django supports 4 types of caching strategies: file system caching, memcached, in-memory caching, and database caching. So file system caching is basically caching anything that we need to cache on the file system by creating a file such as a log or a JSON file or any file. Now this is good for small applications, but for larger applications, accessing data from file, that is opening the file, managing the file and closing the file, takes quite a bit of performance hit. So for larger applications, we usually tend to use a dedicated service like memcached. Memcached is its own service and its particular job is to keep a cache, maintaining a key value pair, removing the cache if it's invalidated, so on and so forth. So Django supports memcached and file system caching. In-memory caching is quite good because it will not have the same latency effect that a file system caching will have. Data stored in memory is quite fast to access than the data stored on a file system. However, we have limited resources when considering the memory capacity. So using in-memory caching for smaller applications that require fast access could be a good idea. However, for larger applications, memcached is still preferred. Now, the last one is database caching. Now, this is good if you wish to cache an object that you need to use after quite some time in future. So, because getting data from the database is also an expensive operation, you need to open the connection from the database, then ask for the data by writing a query and getting back the response and then parsing the response. So caching in the database is only good if you are caching something that is accessed infrequently over long periods of time. So these are all the 4 caching strategies that is supported by Django. Now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is a meta class in Django? So a meta class in Django is an inner class that provides metadata about the outer class in Django. This metadata can be thought of as simply configuration parameters that tell Django how we want it to behave. So for instance, it allows us to define such things as permissions, associated database table name, singular and plural versions of that name, and so on and so forth. So for example, in our application we have a model form which is called post form. This form is taken care of by Django itself. So all we need to do is provide some configuration parameters or metadata, such as which model do we want it to use. This model is then used by the post form to save data or fetch data from the database. Also we are giving it the name of valid fields. So if suppose we have a database table that has fields such as the ID, the title, the name, date published and date modified, and all we wish to do is provide users with the ability to enter the title and the name of their post and submit it to our application, well then this form will do it for us. All we need to do is provide an array of attributes in our meta class, which are these. Similarly, if we want the user to be able to submit the publishing date, we can modify this array by adding another item in it, which is the name of the database field, which is date published. However, in this case, just the title and the body is fine. So a meta class is simply used to configure our Django application's behavior by providing meta information about the application. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, when should we generate and apply migrations in a Django project and why? So we should do that whenever we create or make changes to the models of one of our apps in our project. This is because a migration is used to make changes to the database schema and is generated based on our models. So if I were to make change to our models by adding a field, removing a field, changing a field, this change should be then reflected into our database schema, which is only done by running the migrations after creating it. So whenever we make changes to our models in any of our apps, we need to then generate a migration and then apply that migration. That way our database schema will be in sync with our models. So let's move on to the next question. What is serialization in Django? Well, simply put, serialization is the process of converting Django models into other formats such as XML, JSON and so on. So as we saw previously, whenever we get data back from the database using Django's ORM, we get it in the form of a query set. Now that query set is then used by our Django application to display data on our application. However, if we wish to convert that data into another format, such as an XML format or a JSON format, which we can use easily to send over the internet, this is done by serialization. So let's look at how serialization works. So as you can see, we have logged into our Django shell and we'll try to serialize one of the query sets that we get from the database. So first let's import our model. Okay, so from log.models import post. Now let's import the serializer. So from django.core import serializers. Now that that's imported, when we get a single row from the database, we get it in the form of a query set. So for instance, post.objects.filter, here we'll get a single row with the primary key 1. So this is what the data looks like. It's a query set with one post object. However, this data cannot be sent to another client using an HTTP response. So to convert it into another format like JSON or XML or any other format that can be passed and sent as an HTTP response, we use a serializer. So for example, let's convert this data into the JSON format. So serializers.serialize. This takes two parameters. The first is the format, which is JSON, and second is a query set, in which case it's our data. And as you can see, it's formatted nicely in the JSON format. It contains the name of the model, the primary key, which is 1, the fields that are in our database such as title and body, and their value. Now JSON is not the only format that we can serialize in. We can serialize it in XML as well. However, JSON is usually preferred over XML because it's a lot less verbose and easy to read and parse. So if I were to serialize it in the XML format, we get the name. Serializers, I spelled that incorrectly. Serializers, serialize, and then we pass in the format and then the data. And as you can see, we get an XML format. And as you can also see that the XML formatted string is quite a lot bigger than the JSON formatted string. So you can serialize the data in whichever format you prefer, and using the JSON serializer we can serialize it in the JSON format, or we can serialize it in XML format. So this is why we use serializers to convert complex objects that we get from the database using Django's ORM into readable and parsable formats like JSON or XML. Moving on to the next question. So the next question is, what are generic views? When building a web application, there are certain kinds of views that we need to build again and again, such as a view that displays all the records in the database. Displaying all the books inside a books table can be thought of as an example. These kinds of views perform the same functions, and that leads to repeated code. To solve this issue, Django uses a class-based generic view. Class-based views can be used by inheriting from the desired class from django.views.generic module and provide some information like the model we wanted to use, the context object name, etc. So for example, in our sample application we have a post list view. Its job is to get all the records from the database, pass it into the template, that is blog/index.html, and display all the records that it fetched from the database. So for doing that, we would typically need to instantiate the model, get all the records, then pass it into the template by building a context object. So if we were to remove the duplicacy in the code, what we can do is just inherit from the generic view, list view, as we have done here, and we have simply specified the parameters that we needed to use. So the model that this view will be using is post. The template which it will be using to rendering the model would be blog/index.html. The context name would be posts, and ordering will be by ID in ascending order. That way it builds a response and sends the response back to the client. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, which companies use Django? Django is quite a popular web application development framework. Many big companies use Django for several parts of their application. For instance, Instagram uses Django, so does Disqus, Mozilla, Bitbucket, Spotify, NASA, Eventbrite, even Quora uses Django. So as you can see that Django is quite a scalable web application framework since it can handle traffic for such large websites. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, which class do we inherit from in order to perform unit tests? We inherit from the Django test case class in order to perform unit tests, as it contains all the methods we need to perform unit tests. Methods like assert equal, assert true, so on and so forth. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, which class do we inherit from in order to perform functional tests? We inherit from Django.test.liveServerTest case to perform functional tests. This allows us to launch a live Django server in the background on setup, and it shuts it down on teardown. This allows us to use an automated testing client such as Selenium in order to perform functional tests by launching a browser instance and then simulating real users' actions like clicking on a button, submitting a form, so on and so forth. Let's move on to the next question. What is the Django.test.client class used for? The client class acts as a dummy browser, allowing us to test our views and interact with our Django-powered application programmatically. This is especially useful for doing integration tests. So for instance, imagine that you have created a URL pattern and have created the view associated with it. Now you need to test that if that view is being loaded correctly and the browser is responding to that URL pattern. We can perform this kind of a test using the test client class from the Django. So the last question we have is, what is the Django.test.client class used for? So the client class acts as a dummy web browser that allows us to test our views and interact with our Django powered application programmatically. This is especially helpful for doing integration testing. For example, let's suppose that you have created a URL pattern and associated a view with it. Now we wish to check if that URL pattern is performing correctly. To do this, we can use the Django.test.client class by giving it the URL pattern that we wish to test, and then check the response. If it returns a response code of 200, which means everything went successfully, that means that our view was correctly registered and the URL is being correctly captured by our Django application. These kinds of tests are called integration tests because they use several parts of our application and check if they are working correctly together.
Quick info guys, if you're looking for end-to-end training in Django, do check out Intellipaat's Django certification training course. The link is in the description box below. So guys, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any queries, don't forget to leave them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching.